Are we good? Okay, good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Mensch, and I am your local PDS rep. So if you call someone for help, you're usually talking to me. That lovely gentleman over there happens to be one of my coworkers and also the love of my life. That's Bill. So I get to work with my husband every day, which is super cool, and I like it. So if you have any questions or need anything, he can probably help you as well. So this morning we're going to be doing the Intro to Church Office. I'm going to be teaching out of version 7, which is what you're looking at up here. Most of what I have to say is going to apply to the earlier versions as well, although there are some features that might be in 7 that might not be in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, depending on the version that you're using. If you have questions about a specific version, feel free to ask me. If you have questions at all while we're going, feel free to raise your hand or just yell it out to me. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so yelling things at me doesn't really interrupt me very much anymore. The directions are over there. If you didn't get a copy of them, you'll want to have those because that's going to be the outline that we're following for this morning. So first thing we want to talk about when we're looking at the program is the way that the screen is laid out. All the way up here at the very top of the screen, there's some little buttons. Are those visible underneath of the curtain? Can you see where my mouse is right now? I can see from here. Okay. So coming across the top, these are going to be in version 7. They wouldn't be in some of the earlier versions. The one to the left is the back button and the forward button. These move forwards and backwards, like if you're in a web browser. So you're going to go back through the screens you were on or forward through the screens that you were on. We have undo, cut, copy, and paste. These work just like any other regular Windows buttons. And if you hold your mouse over it, you'll see the little keyboard shortcuts as well. So undo is Control and Z, cut is Control and X, copy is Control and C, paste is Control and V, just like any other regular Windows program. We have a spell check button that'll spell check the word that you're on. There's the print screen button. This just brings up a print command. This can be very helpful if you're in the program and you get an error message and you don't want to write down what the error message is. You can do Control and P or that print screen button and it'll send a copy of your screen to the printer. The other place where that can be helpful is you're up on a family and father comes in and says, oh, can you print me off their information? And all you want to do is just give them what's on your screen, Control and P, or that print screen will send just what you're looking at to the printer. To the right of the print screen button is your calendar button. If you click on that, it just brings up a little calendar which shows you the months and the years. To the right of your calendar button is your display button. The display button is going to let you choose your background color. It's going to let you choose your sound. So if something pops up, do you want it to play a little sound when it does that? It also lets you adjust your screen sizes. When you have a monitor that is more landscape than portrait, so more rectangle than square, it can be helpful to choose this option for adjust for non-standard DPI. Sometimes when you have it with one of those more landscape monitors, your next button down at the bottom or some of the buttons at the bottom of your screen get cut off. Choosing that option helps it to resize it properly to adjust for a more landscape screen. Changing things here only affect your workstation. So if you change your background color, it's not going to affect anybody else in your office. So you can feel free to set the program to match your mood. There are some very pretty colors in here. There are some interesting colors in here, so I don't know that you necessarily want to stare at the sunset all day. It's a little bit bright, and I think I would go a little bit blind. But there's some lovely colors in here. If you're someone who's using more than one PDS program, so for example, I'll be flipping back and forth between church and formation and school, I'll set each program to a different color. So when I'm looking at a screen, I can tell very easily I'm in blue, I'm in church, pink, I'm in school, and green, I'm in formation. So it just helps to give you a little bit of a visual reminder when you're looking at that. To the right of the display is a little people button that says who is running. If I click on it, it's going to tell me who else has the program open. So if you're working in a church with multiple people and you need to make a backup or do something that requires exclusive use, this tells you who else has the program open. It's going to tell you the computer that has it open, and if you're using security, it'll tell you the username that has it open. So instead of having to go to each workstation or call everybody and say, can you close out? This will tell you who has it open so you know specifically who to tell to get out of the program. And if Father keeps telling you, no, I don't have it open, but it says it's open on his computer, you can yell at him. Nicely, I'm sure, because we wouldn't want to yell meanly. To the right of the people is our little house button. say you have something pulled up on your screen and somebody comes into the office and is looking at your computer, you don't necessarily want them to see what you have up on there. Clicking on the little home button just takes you back to a blank screen. So if you're out in the reception area and there's other people that can see your computer, sometimes it's nice just to be able to click on that to sort of hide what you were doing. And if I hit my back button, it would take me right back to where I was before. To the right of the house button is the favorites button. This is something that came in at the tail end of version 6. The favorites lets me set shortcuts inside the program, sort of like setting a bookmark in an internet browser. So say there's a report that I run once a month, or a report that I'm going to be running several times over, like our tax statement report. So I know I'm going to have to keep going to it. I can never remember where it's at. I have to find it once. So go to contributions and reports and tax reports, and there's my tax statement. I have it highlighted here. I can click my little star, and I can click Add Favorite, and it's going to create a shortcut to that report for me. So now, no matter where I'm at in the program, I can click my little star, and I can click my shortcut, and it's going to take me right back to that report. And you can create as many of those shortcuts as you want, so you can do them to reports, you can do them to quick posting processes, you can do them to certain screens. So it just depends on what you find useful or where you're going along in the program. It just helps you be able to find that a little bit quicker and a little bit easier in the future. Granted, you have to find it first to be able to set that shortcut to it. Underneath of our command row, we have our different sections of the program. The first section is the information section, and that's where you're going to spend the majority of your time. So the information is where we have our families, our members, and our contributions. If we were in formation or school, we would see those members split out to students and parents and teachers. But we have family member and contribution in the church program. We also have our dashboard section, which we're going to talk more about later. To the right of information is personnel. This is something you'll see just with version 7. With version 7, we have the ability to add in extra people that might not actually be part of our church. So clergy and religious members, staff members, teachers, catechists, volunteers. So people who are doing things at the church that we need to have contact information for them, but not necessarily parishioners. So a lot of times people have a question, they'll say, I want to keep track of somebody who's coming in to volunteer to do stuff with religious ed. So I need to have their clearance information, I need to have contact information for them, but they're not actually a member of a parish. I don't want them to get envelopes, I don't want them showing up on reports. The personnel section lets me stick them in there without adding them into the rest of the program, and still allows me to keep track of name, address, phone numbers, email addresses, that type of information. The report section is where we're going to go to run all of our reports out of the program. Sacramental registers is something that not a lot of churches use. It's an additional license to be able to do that. It's in addition to your regular sacramental information. So you have all your standard sacramental information in the program. What the register does is it allows you to keep that information regardless of whether or not someone is still a member of your parish. So when you delete a member, their sacraments delete out with them. The sacramental register keeps them even after you've deleted them. So it allows you to keep sort of an electronic record of all of your sacraments, regardless of whether or not that person is still in the program. Some churches have used it. Most of them don't think they're ever going to get away from those hardbound books. So there's not much sense in purchasing a license to keep track of something that isn't going to have everything they need anyway. So it's up to you whether or not you would find that useful. The last little spot is the administration spot. And this is where we have our fund set up, our users and passwords, and our user log. The fund setup is where we can set up our fund periods and our activities. The users and passwords is where we can turn on security inside of the program. And the view user log is something that a lot of people never pay attention to, but it keeps track of all of the changes that are being done inside of the program. So when I changed my color schemes, when I updated the data, I did a restore, I delete a family, I add a family, I mark somebody as inactive, I change their address. All of those things are being recorded in this log. It's being recorded with the date and time that it was done, and if you have security turned on, it's also doing it with the username that you logged in with. So it's keeping track of that information. So when father comes and deletes a family out and then comes and yells at you because this family is no longer here and why aren't they here, you can look back and say, hey, this was done Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock and there was no one else here at the rectory. So it gives you a little bit of knowledge of what's being happened or an audit trail. We found this particularly helpful when you have multiple people working in the program and newer people working in the program who might not necessarily understand what it is that they're doing sometimes. You can look back through and see what actually happened inside of the data. If you're sharing your data between church and school and formation, you'll see the activities for all 3 programs in the same place. This last column over here is telling you what program it was done in. So if somebody promoted the grades, if somebody did the remove advance process, all of that is going to be included in here as well. You can print from here. You can also access this into an Excel file. So this file is the PDS office file. It's in the data folder of the program. So one of the things that people find more helpful is if you're just looking for something, it's easy to come here. If it's a lot of some things that you're looking through, you could pull that up in Excel and sort it and do things with it that way. Make a copy if you're going to do that, because if you delete information out of there, you've deleted it from the actual log file, and that's not necessarily helpful. And we really don't want you going in and covering up your mistakes if you did it that way, so that somebody can't yell at you. The last little thing over here on our bar is our file menu. And the file menu is where we have most of our setup and backup options. When they did version 7, they created this button, and we added in our setup options over here, our Sacramento setup options, our keyword lists, some system process options, a new import function, our bulk mail functions, our backup functions, our fixing functions, data sync functions, user guides, online resources, support, and your about. The one thing that I do want to point out that a lot of people miss, underneath the data sync, there's an option for mobile access. With version 7, they created this mobile sync feature, which can be helpful particularly for people who are on the road. It allows you to sync up specific families. You can do all of your families or a selection of families to the web. And then from any mobile access or any device that has a mobile connection on it or a web connection on it, you can go to the website. It's parishmobi or parish.mobi. It'll ask you for your organization ID. You would fill that in, and it's going to ask you for a username and a password. And once you fill that in, you can access your family's names, addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses. So it's a way of being able to access basic contact information through a simple web page. So if somebody's out doing visitation, he needs to look up a phone number, if father's out on the road and needs to be able to make a call, he can pull this up, assuming that he can go to the Safari button on an iPhone or whatever Droid product he has and pull that information up. So you can choose what families it is that you would want to upload. If you want to include personnel information, you can do that as well. And you can set your update schedule. So you can have it set to update automatically, set to update once a week, set how often it wants to update that information. So it's something that's kind of hiding back there inside of version 7, and it's free to use. We're going to pop back over to the information tab. So if you're looking on your outline, we're now jumping down to section number 2, our family information. And when we're on the information tab, I'm going to go over here and click on families. And this is going to pull out my family information. This is the screen you will probably look at the most in church office. It's where the majority of our information is entered for our family. When we're looking at the information, it's laid out with our navigation box up here at the top, our task box up here at the top, and our main data information filled out down here. Our navigation box is what allows us to find particular families. So when we're trying to pull up the Smith family, this is where I'm going to go to search through it. The default is to search by family name, but if I don't want to look up by name, I can drop down my search by button and choose to look up by member name, partial name, ID number, address, partial address, phone number, or email address. So we have lots of different ways of being able to find a family. So if I know that somebody's name in here is Amy, we're going to guess. And I type in Amy. It's going to look through and say, here's all the families that have an Amy in them. So if we get a partial phone message from somebody that said, Amy called and wants you to call her back about something, maybe this is going to help you find who that person is that called. It's going to remember the last thing that you searched by. So if I come up here now and try to find Smith, it's going to do the same kind of search unless I drop this and go back to search by family name, in which case it's going to switch back over this way. And I can pull up my family like that. If I click on my search by again, you're going to see down here at the bottom, it's remembering that Smith search and that first family I looked for. It's going to remember the last 10 families that I displayed. So if I'm going back and forth between the same couple of families, I don't have to keep retyping their name in. I can just select for one of the ones that I previously chose. Underneath of our search by are our scroll buttons. These let me browse forwards or backwards through my families, one at a time with the inside buttons, or to the very end, or to the very beginning with my outside buttons. I can order this by ID number, or I can click on it and choose name to order it alphabetically, and now I'm going to flip through by name. Yes?
How can you get it to default to name?
Okay. If you go up to File, and you go to Setup, and you go to Initial Setup, so File, Setup, and Initial Setup, there is an option in here that says Save Order When Exit Program. You would want to leave that checked, and it's going to save or remember what order you set it in when you go out and come back into the program. So it's in your initial setup options. With version 7, it's File, Setup, and Initial Setup. With older versions, it's going to be the Setup tab at the top and then Initial Setup. And that way it'll remember if you want it sorted by name or by ID number when you close and come back in again. This little button over here on the right that says Members is going to show me the specific members in this family. So if I wanted to look at one of the kids, clicking on Members over here will take me to the head of the household. Clicking Members here lets me pick the specific member in this family that I want to look at, as opposed to going to the head and then browsing through them. Down here on the bottom is all of my actual data. So I have my ID number, that's going to be their envelope number. The Available button shows me available envelope number. So if I'm adding in a new family and I need to pick the envelope number, this shows me numbers that are unused. I can start it with whatever number I want. So if we're using like a 4-digit scheme, I can say start with envelope number 5,000, and it's going to show me the available numbers from 5,000 on. I can also tell it to show me numbers that are currently in use, and it'll show me numbers for people that are still in currently. I can tell it how many I want to display, so if I only want to look at 50 at a time, I can do that as well. And we can print this screen if you wanted to keep a list on your desk instead of having to go in all the time.
Is there a default if you don't plug in a number?
It's going to default to 1.
Oh, okay.
So 1 would be the first one that it would default to. Otherwise, you can fill in a number. We have our second ID number here. Usually that's used for your diocesan number. This is the number you're going to see when you're doing Lenten appeal. It's the number that's filled in on that card. So usually you get that from the diocese. You want to remember to fill that in if you're using the program to do your Lenten appeal. To the right of that is the inactive checkbox. If we're referring to somebody as being marked as inactive, this is what we're talking about, this checkbox up here. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, why should I mark someone as inactive? The hard part for me is that this is different from church to church to church. In some churches, there's no way to get marked as inactive. Everybody is active in there. Other churches, it's because they're dead or they've moved. Some churches, it's because they didn't show up for Mass last week. So it depends on the church and how you have your data. The thing we will tell you is to be consistent. Whatever it is that you want to use it for, do it that way for everybody. Don't have some people because they didn't show up last week and other people because they're dead. It makes it very difficult to manage your data when you're not being consistent across that with that inactive box. Our recommendation is that the inactive button should be used for people who are dead or who have moved out of your parish. I don't care if they don't come to church. If you still want them to get mailings, we want to have them marked as active. Envelopes, we have a button down here for envelope user to say whether or not we want to get them. So just because someone doesn't want to receive envelopes, that's not really the best reason to mark them as inactive. Maybe they're giving electronically, maybe they stick cash in, they don't want to use an envelope. We want to make sure that we're not necessarily just using inactive just because they don't want to get envelopes. That's not the best use of that button. To the right of our inactive button is this Add Documents button. This is something that came in with version 7. One of the questions that people were getting is, I've written a letter to somebody in the program, and I want to be able to keep a copy of this letter that I sent to this family. Or if we're talking about on the member screen, we're going to see this as well. They sent me a copy of their baptismal certificate, and I want to be able to keep a record of that. If I click Add Documents, it's going to allow me to link a document, a Word document, a picture, a PDF, whatever kind of document I want to link, I can link it to this family. It's not storing the document in PDS, it's storing the link to that document. So if that document is saved in some folder on your server, this is remembering where you've saved it at, so that way you're able to find it more easily again in the future. So similar to how our favorites is creating a shortcut, this is just creating a little note for us. So think about it, if you have a legal pad on the top of a file folder in the front of your filing cabinet, and you're saying, this is where I stored this, all it's doing is making a note of where you stored that and allowing us to find it more easily later. So if I do this, and I go to, oh, I can't get to it on here. Ignore what I'm doing. I turned off the access for that on my program. It would pull up your Windows file menu and you'd be able to choose the file that you would want to link to in order to come back to that. But I turned that off because it's on the MacBook and it can mess up with my Mac side. So you can just pretend like that worked. And you can try it out at home and call me if you have questions. Underneath of that, we have our family name. Yeah.
Sorry, it had a scan button there. What's that refer to?
Yes. If you have a scanner that's hooked up to your computer,
Right.
that would activate the scanner that's hooked up to your computer when you click that scan button.
Oh.
So it's similar to hitting the start button on your scanner, but the scanner would have to be directly hooked up to your computer for that to work. What most places do is, because the scanners tend now to be more like a Wi-Fi scanner, is they would scan the document and have it saved to wherever it saves onto your network, and then choose the file in PDS once it's already been scanned in. Most places don't have like the old flatbed scanners anymore that are just kind of hooked into one machine. And if you're looking for a recommendation for a scanner, we highly recommend the SnapScan machines. They're pretty fantastic. We keep one in our house to scan like our mail and that kind of stuff. Bill makes tech gadgets and it's a good one. Underneath of that, we have our family. Yeah.
I'm sorry, if someone, if you do put something in there,
Mhm.
how do we know that there's something there?
This, instead of saying add documents, is going to say view documents.
Oh, so it's gonna tell you. there's
Yep, so
something.
this will change from saying add to view, so that would let you know that there's a document attached to that family. Underneath of that, we have our name. That's going to be the name of our family. And if I click the three little black dots at the end, that brings up my name breakdown box. When you add a new family in, it's going to have you prompt to fill in through this screen so that you fill in the names in the proper order. And then it automatically fills in mailing name, formal, and informal salutations for you. These bottom three are able to be overwritten. So for example, my grandfather was dead for 10 years, but she wanted her mail address as Reverend Mrs. Carl Ellenberger. And if you did not send your mail to her that way, she would call and yell at you. So you could click into here for the mailing name and overwrite this. Oh, my cap lock is turned on. Reverend Mrs. Carl Ellenberger. And then whenever it sends mail out as the mailing name, is going to use that, but it's not going to affect the way that the information is filled in up at the top here. So it just allows me to specifically say how someone wants to get their mail. We'll see this a lot of times where we have a spouse whose husband is non-Catholic and they want the mail just addressed to the spouse. We'll see it sometimes when there's weird name formats for how somebody wants to have their name listed, if the spouse is keeping her name, whatever you want to do with that. Up here at the top, since this person's last name and title are the same as her husband's, we have it filled in this way. But if we have an unmarried couple living together or someone who's kept a different last name, we're able to fill that in here. And it's going to automatically adjust our formats for us, so we can see that it changes it down here to Mr. Bennett and Mrs. Smith. However we would want to have that listed there, it automatically adjusts the information for us. Underneath of that, we have our date registered. That's simply the date that they registered in the program. On any date field, if I type in a T, it will fill today's date in for me without me having to type in the date. That's going to work on any date field in the program. T brings up today's date. If you know a rough estimate of when the date occurred, we're going to see this particularly with sacramental information, but also sometimes with registration. If you drop this button down, you can choose an approximate date value. So instead of having to fill in the full date, I can fill in just the month or the year. So I know that they registered in January of 2014, but I don't know the actual date. Or I know that somebody was baptized in 1979, but I don't know anything else. I could choose just year only. So it allows us to not have to fill in that full date information. To the right of our registered is our checkbox for envelope user. This came in around version 4 of the program, and it allows us to say who we want to get envelopes. It's not telling us whether or not they use them. It's just telling whether or not we want them to get them. We can set this in that same setup menu that we looked at for the order to have this box default to true, which means that whenever you add a new family, this box will be automatically defaulted to be checked. You can also use a quick posting process to check all the boxes that we would want to. So if you've never used this before, don't think you have to go through and check everybody. We can use a quick posting process for doing that. This is usually easier than trying to manage your keyword list or your envelope list through a keyword or through an ID number range. It allows us to come through and check or uncheck that box fairly easily when people want to stop getting envelopes or start getting envelopes. And it allows us to do something else for our special envelopes. Usually people send to a smaller group for the regular envelopes and then a larger group for Christmas, Easter, and maybe Mother's Day, Father's Day, or some other special mailing. What you can do is say that for our regular mailings, I want every active family who has that box checked to get envelopes. For my Christmas mailing, I want every active family, regardless of whether or not that box is checked, to get my envelopes. So it allows me to kind of distinguish between those two groups. So I can still send to my active list, which would be everybody for Christmas and Easter, but just to that envelope box for my regular mailings. And when you run that envelope company report, there's an option that's going to say limit to those with the envelope user checkbox marked. And if that box is checked, it means it's only going to people who have that envelope user checkbox marked. So it's an easy way of being able to flag or pull those people out for our mailings. To the right of that is synchronized with diocese. Harrisburg Diocese doesn't use that, so you can ignore it altogether. Under that, we have our family status. Different churches use this for different things. Normally we see it for some type of marital status, church marriage, divorced, single-parent family. A lot of times we'll see it used for valid or invalid marriage. It just depends on what you want to use it for. Some people say this is a church family. Some people say this is a school family. Have at it with whatever you would like. Again, just please be consistent. To the right of that is our left parish date. When a family moves out of the parish, we highly, highly, highly recommend filling this in. Again, T will fill today's date in, and it's going to prompt me to mark the family as inactive. I can say yes, and now they're in here, their little inactive box is checked. They're not going to show up on my reports unless I specifically choose to include inactive families, but they're still visible. I can still run reports on them, and I can still access their information. The reason we recommend doing this instead of deleting them right away, when I delete a family, I delete all of their contributions along with it. So when I go to do my end of year reporting, their money's not being included and I can't print a tax statement for them. So say I'm somebody who gives every week and I leave in October, I'm still going to want my tax statement come January, February, March. If it's in here and marked as inactive, I can very easily print that out for them. If I've deleted them, it makes me have to go through another process to be able to get that information. So we would recommend marking them inactive and leaving them that way through the end of the year. What we can do after that point is once we're done with taxes, so usually around April or May, I could come over here to processes, I could say remove families, and I could say that I want to take out everybody who has a date left parish between 01/01/2014 and 12/31/2014. And that would then remove all of those people who left between that time frame. So it allows me to quickly then take them all out if that's what I want to do after I'm done with my taxes for that year. Some people will leave them inactive and leave them that way for forever. Other people clear them out once a year. Some people go through, every couple of years and do that. It just depends on what works for you. And part of that we find different parishes function different ways. In a more urban parish, they're going to have a lot more turnover, so they kind of want to keep that a little bit more clean. In a more rural parish, you don't have as much turnover, so people tend to stay there longer, so you're really not clearing out as much information because people might be kind of moving back and forth inside of or between two different parishes. But again, filling that in gives us a helpful reminder of when they left. The other thing that we would recommend doing is marking down in the remarks why they left. They moved, they died, they got kicked out because they did something really bad. I don't know. But we're able to come in here in the remarks section and type out whatever we would like with that. One of the things that we find is that when one secretary leaves and another secretary comes in, you're inheriting all of that data. And we want to be as nice to the people coming after us as we possibly can be so that they can understand why things were done inside of the program and not just willy-nilly, this person's inactive because I didn't like them or something like that. Hopefully not, I can't imagine that any of you would ever do that though. So underneath of our left parish, we have our address. We have address line 1 and address line 2. Line 2 is if we have an apartment number or complex name. At the end of our address button is this map button. If I click on that, it is going to bring up Google Maps, and it is going to bring up, you can ignore the script page. Google changed something with the way that they did that, so you're going to see that little message button. It's okay, just click yes, it'll pull it up. And here's this person's address. If Street View has been done, you're able to see a street view of that person's house, and wherever this person lives, they haven't done that yet. But then I can get directions to here or from here. If you don't like Google Maps, underneath the mapping preferences, you can choose it to look at Yahoo or MapQuest or something else altogether, depending on how you would like to view that information. So the MapQuest has a little directions button right on the left. So whatever you would want to do with that, it's an easy way of being able to get directions if we're trying to do visitation, if we need to be able to check somebody's boundary, or if you're just nosy, it allows you to go in there and take a look at that information. If I click the little red X in the corner, it's going to come back out. We have our city and state here. If I click and drop down on my city and state box, you're going to see all the city and state values that I have filled in the program. If you notice, something is always going to default when you're adding a new family. If it's something that you don't want to be the default, when you click on that little button, there's a manage button. And if I click on manage, it's going to bring up my keyword list. And we're going to talk more about the keyword list in a little bit. But I have a default city that I can set here. Normally, it's going to be the city that you use most often. So if I live in Havertown, I'm going to set my default city as Havertown because that's going to be where the majority of my parishioners live. You can also set default zip codes in here. So Havertown is always 19083. It saves me from having to type that in every time I add a family in Havertown. But if I lived in Philadelphia, there's like 800 zip codes, so I probably wouldn't want to fill in a default zip code because they're going to be all over the place. To the right of my city and state is my zip code, and you have room for the first 5 and then the next 4 if you want to fill those in. If you notice, we also have these 3 little black dots. That brings up my zip code breakdown box, and I can fill in the delivery point, the carrier route, the line of travel, longitude, and latitude, because I know you all have that at your fingertips to fill that information in, but it's here if you would like to do that. The first parts get filled in when you do CAS certification of your mail. Helps you get a cheaper bulk mailing rate if you're doing that. Normally your envelope company does it for you when they do their mailing, so people usually don't have it filled in, but it's here if you would want to. And I imagine you're going to set up like drones or something to go spy on your parishioners. You could fill in longitude and latitude, but most people don't have that information. We have a checkbox here for send no mail. This is going to allow me to exclude people by default when I'm doing letters or labels out of the program. It doesn't have anything to do with my envelope mailing. It's when I'm creating labels or letters inside of the program, the default is to not include people who have this box checked. I can override that when I'm doing the mailing, but that would be the default. To the right of that is geographical area. This is a holdover from the old DOS version of the program, so we're talking like 1990 something. It used to be when you had a giant map of the parish, and you could kind of like play Battleship and say this person lives at A1 and this person's at B6. That's what it was meant for. Most of the time now people use it to mark in a township or a development. Sometimes you see it used for like the school district that they're in. If a parish has different area captains, we'll see it sometimes filled in with that captain's name, so they've broken their parish down into different sections for visitation, sometimes for prayer groups or small groups, but for the most part it doesn't get used. You can sort by this field. So if it's something that you're looking for something to be able to sort by, the geographical area is a good one for that. I believe it's 10 characters long. It's not a drop-down box. You can type in whatever you want. To the right of that is our picture. If I click on that button and I browse to where I have my photos stored, you'd want to store your pictures on the server. And I choose a picture. That picture is then going to be displayed up here in the corner, and if I click on it, it's going to bring up a bigger picture of that. That's my kid, Mike. He's adorable. We're able to store and display pictures inside of the program. Where this can be very helpful, someone calls you on the phone and they say, "Oh, Amy, it's so good to talk to you. How are the kids?" And you have no idea who this person is. If there are pictures in here, it helps you to put a name to a face. It's also helpful when you get new staff in, particularly in our priests. They're able to kind of come through and have an idea of who these people are. One of the things we've seen churches start to do is when a new family registers, they ask them to email the church with a digital picture of their family. Most families have a digital picture somewhere of all of them. One, it's going to give you their email address when they email it to you, and two, it gives you the picture. You save it into your pictures folder, you link to it in here, and now you're able to see that. We have a report built into the program that's called the Family Pictorial Directory. We'll see people print out that directory for any families who've registered in the last 2 months, and they give it out to all of their ushers. And they say, "Here's our new families. If you see one of them, make sure you go up and introduce yourself, welcome them to the parish," something like that. So it's a way of being able to use the program to help make better connections with the families in our program. So all you have to do is you're not saving the picture in the program, just like with our documents. It's saving the link to that picture, but you're going to see it displayed up here at the top. If you do a pictorial directory with like Olin Mills or one of those companies, they will usually give you a disk that can be imported into the program, so it'll link all of the families, assuming that they have that envelope number when they do their taking the picture part. So they're able to link that back here, and then you can import all of those in. We have our phone numbers. We can have as many phone numbers per family as we would like to. We have room for the area code, the phone number, and then an extension at the end. The description is the type of number that we want it to be listed as, a home number, a work number, a cell number, and the checkbox here is for unlisted. If you notice in here, I have, well, I didn't add them in. You can set up descriptions. We do it real quick. Keywords. Text setup, text providers, mark on. Okay. You can use different descriptions, like cell, or see these ones here that say text, and if it's set as text AT&T, there's a report in the program that's called the Quick Communication Report, and it allows me to send text messages through the program. The phone number has to be filled in here that we want to get the text, and then the description needs to be text dash and the provider. So assuming that I have that information, it'll allow me to text that person. So say we're going to be closing down because of a snow emergency, I can send a text message out through the program, and it'll what it does is it basically emails the provider forwards it as a text message to that person's phone. That's how we have to have that provider information filled in there. But it's free to use for us. They would get charged whatever they normally get charged for a text message. So people don't have to give you their number if they don't want to get text messages from you, but it allows us to do that as an easy and free way to be able to communicate quickly with our families. The email addresses are over here on the right. With version 7, they made it so that you can have multiple email addresses per family. We can have a description, so we can say this is the spouse email, head email. We would not recommend in a description saying Amy's email, Bill's email, because you can only use that description for people named Amy or people named Bill. Where head email and spouse email you can use on almost every family. We have preferred and unlisted checkboxes. The unlisted is the same thing as with our phone number unlisted. The preferred, when we go to send an email, We have the option of sending it to anybody with an address or only people who prefer email. That's this box here if they have that checked. And we can also say to send to multiple email addresses, so we could send it to everybody in the list or just the first name in the list. Down here is our remarks box. This is an unlimited text box, type away to your heart's content. We have both general and confidential. If I fill something in under confidential, you'll see there's a little asterisk that'll show up next to it to let me know that something's been filled in underneath of there. So that little asterisk tells me that something's filled in that remarks section. If you turn on security in the program, you can restrict who has access to confidential remarks. So if the priest would like to use that to keep track of their own notes, you can restrict the access to that for other people as well. If you want to come down to a new blank line inside of the remarks field, Control and Enter brings me down the line. If I just press Enter without the control, it's like hitting the Save button up at the top of the screen. Over to the bottom right-hand corner are our keywords. Keywords are sort of like the catch-all in the program. If you don't know where else to stick the information, stick it into a keyword. We can have as many keywords per family as we would like to, and we can have as many different keyword descriptions as we would like to. I could use this to say somebody's returned a census card for 2014. It's somebody who's going to be gone in the summer. It's somebody who is a school family. It's somebody who's a religious ed family. It's somebody who their family is a founding family. It's somebody who wants to get a copy of the bulletin every week. So we can use this for lots of different things in order to keep track of different groups of families. So it's a family keyword, so we want to use something that applies to the entire family. I don't want to say that this person is a lector because the whole family is an elector. I would do that on the member screen, not on the family screen. But we can have as many different values as we would want. Down at the very bottom, we can see what funds the family is using, how many members they have, and the last time the screen was changed. So if you're looking at a family and you're wondering, oh, I wonder if this is somebody who we've updated their address recently, this family hasn't been touched since January 10th of 2013, so I know if they moved in the last year, I have not updated their address to the new address. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, we have room for other addresses, which is going to allow me to fill in a mailing address or an alternate address. The mailing address only gets filled in if they have an address different than their street address. So I don't want to fill their street address in both places. I only fill this in if they have a P.O. box or something that's different than their regular address. The alternate address is if we have a secondary residence. Maybe they go down to the shore every summer, maybe they go to Arizona for the winter. I can fill that in, and I can fill the active from and the active to over here to send mail to that alternate address as opposed to their regular address. This does not send mail to two places. These addresses allow me to choose where that one place is going. So it's not splitting the mail, it's just diverting the mail. If I need to split the mail, that's going to be something we can do with this relationships section. Relationships is new to version 7, and it allows me to set up courtesy copies for different people inside of the family. So for example, if I have a divorced family and I need to keep track of the father's information, I can link in somebody that's already in the program to them, or I can add somebody in from outside of the program and keep track of an address and phone number information for them. I can also choose for that person to receive courtesy copies or to be shown on the family directory. So it allows me to really keep track of those split families. The other thing that relationships is helpful for is when we have elderly parishioners and we need to keep track of emergency contact information. So maybe we have my grandmother is 95 and she lives at Grand Farms and she goes to whatever church, and if something goes wrong with her, we want you to call her son Bob who lives over here. So it allows me to keep track of that information without having to add them in as a person into the program, but still have that information accessible. Underneath the relationships, we have family recap. This just shows me the members in the family, their relationship to the family, and their ages. The age is based off of today's date. If it shows up as 0, either they haven't turned 1 yet or they don't have a date of birth filled in. Down on the bottom half of the screen, we're going to see our financial information. So it's just showing me what that family has given to the different funds over the past years. And if it's a tuition fund or a capital campaign fund, it'll tell me if there's a balance in there as well. Underneath of that is our letters, visits, etc. This is our correspondence history with the family. Whenever we print a letter or a label out of the program, it gives us the option to say log the letter or label. This is where it's going to put that information. So it's going to put in the date that it was printed, the description is typically the name of the report, and then the type of something you can pick, and then there's room for a note. So if we wanted to record as we're doing them all of our tax statements, I print off 10 tax statements, I say log the letter or label, those 10 families now have that note that we printed their tax statement. So in 2 weeks when family A calls and says, you never sent me my tax statement, you can look back and say, actually, we sent that to you a week and a half ago. So it just gives you, it doesn't mean you actually put it in the mail, but it does mean that you printed it. So that we have the note that that was done for us. You can also come in and manually fill in information. So if you wanted to keep track of phone calls that were made, visits that were done, we have this on both the family and the member screen. So if you wanted to do sick calls and put that in under the members, you could do that as well. We're able to stick into here whatever we would like. On the bottom half of the screen, we have some other tasks. We have the individual letter and label button. Anybody know what this does? It does an individual letter and label for the family that you are on. You thought I was going to trick you. So when you click on that, it allows me to do a label or an envelope or a letter for the specific family that I'm on. And I can use one of these generic ones, but I can also add standard ones into here. So if whenever we have somebody who changes an address and we send them a follow-up letter and say, we've recorded your address change. Or we'll see this on the member screen. One of the ones that get asked for a lot is like an eligibility certificate to be a confirmation sponsor or baptism sponsor. You could have that saved as one of your letters in there. So somebody calls up, you pull up your screen, you do whatever verifications you say to say they're eligible to be a sponsor, and then you can just hit individual letter, choose that letter, and print it out. So it's an easy way of being able to keep in there standard letters or forms that you might send out to people without having to run through a whole report to get to them. We also have the listing screen option. This is going to pull up one big giant long list of every family in the program. It's going to start by looking like this. We're going to see black text and red text. The black text are our active families. The red text are our inactive families. And down at the bottom, you have the option to view both active and inactive, active only, or inactive only. You can see it changes the colors depending on which option I click on. And the default is to show me the family name, the envelope number, any of the members in the family. That's why you can see different amounts of space between different families depending on how many members they have. The members' relationship, address, city, and phone number. For me, when I'm looking at mine, the member name and relationship isn't very important to me. I care more about seeing the family's email address and their phone number than I do about the members in the family. I can click on the little customize view button in the lower left-hand corner, and I can say get rid of member name. I'm just clicking on it here, and I'm clicking the arrow that points in the opposite direction. And same thing for relationship. And then I can scroll back up and find that email field. Bam, email 1. And add that on. I just double clicked on it to add it, or I can click and drag them back and forth. And I hit save OK. And now I've gotten rid of the one and I've added the other. So there's somebody's email address filled in. That's going to be workstation by workstation. So if you want to change yours, it's not going to mess up anybody else's. And you can come in and play with that as much as you would like to. It's also a great way to get familiar with the different fields and what they're called in the program. So if I'm looking at this and I say like, oh, I wonder what this field is. Date change, date created. There's all these different date fields. What do these all mean? I can add as many of them on here as I want to and then see what everybody has filled in underneath of that, as opposed to kind of having to try to flip through a family screen to figure out what it is. It's an easy way to be able to see my data at large and kind of what's filled in those fields.
How do you alphabetize that?
Okay, so when I'm looking at the list right now, mine's sorted by ID number. Right up here at the top, the same as my scroll buttons. This also controls the sort order of this list. So I can change that order by up at the top to change the sort. And I also have an alphabet running across the top. So if I click on C, it's going to take me to the first family whose last name starts with C. If I click on K, it jumps me down to the Ks. So it helps me jump up and down in that list. One of the big questions we get is how to scroll more effectively. When I'm looking at this screen and I say, oh, I want to go up to the Bs, I'm going to click on my little button, I'm going to drag it up to where I think the Bs are, and I've moved up like to the Js. It doesn't seem like it's actually doing what it should be doing. What these are called dynamic lists as opposed to a static list. A static list, it knows where the beginning and the end and the middles are. A dynamic list means it's always changing and fluctuating because it really has no idea where anything other than the very, very beginning and the very, very end are. So clicking on my button and moving it to where I want to try to go is not effective. I can use my little arrows at the top and my little arrows at the bottom, and they take me a line at a time, which is going to take me a long time to scroll down to where I'm going. The best way to do it is if I want to go up in my list, I want to click in between where my little button is and where my arrow is, and that's going to take me up a whole screen at a time, or it's going to take me down a screen at a time if I'm underneath that scroll button. So that's the much faster way to move through than trying to click one at a time or trying to drag my guy up or down. I could also just use this to move up or down as well, but I find that this is the most effective way for me to go up or down in a list. And you're going to see this on the listing screens, you're going to see it on report screens, on quick posting screens. Any of them are going to function that same way. If I'm looking here and I want to see the detail for a family, double clicking on them lets me pull that information up. So if I double click on the family, it'll bring it up.
Back to the listing screen.
Yeah.
Like, say you have like a list of families who you just got all the emails for. You
Mhm.
can add them into there. You can't add information on this.
No. The listing screen is simply a display screen. It's not an edit screen. So if I want to add in the emails, I'm either coming into the family and typing them in individually, or depending on which version of the program you're using, you could use the import function that's built into the program in version 7. There's a file and an import which would allow me to import in a large amount of data as well. Emails aren't something you can quick post, but there are other things that you could quick post to families like second ID numbers, geographical areas, keywords. But emails, because each one is going to be different, just by the nature of an email address, that's something that you're normally coming in and typing, or with version 7 you could do that import command. So the listing screen lets me see one big giant long list, and again we can sort it by ID number or name, and we have our little guys across here. The other question I get asked is that screen is super tiny and my eyes are pretty terrible. I can't read an 8-point font size. So if you look up here, I'm under that customized view. I can change my font size to 10 or 12 or 16, depending on how blind you are, and make that screen be bigger. And again, changing it here doesn't affect anybody else. Underneath the listing screens is the report button, which would take me to the family reports. We're going to skip that for right now. And also I have my quick posting and my processes. Quick postings allow me to take the same or similar pieces of information and apply them to multiple families at the same time. So for example, I get a list from school of here's all the people who are going to be school families for next year. And we need you to know who this is because we're going to ask you to do mailings to them every so often. I could come in and say family keywords. I could do automatic, which means there's already something on their screen that I'm basing the selection off of, or individual, which means I'm just looking at a list of names that I want to pick. And I can say this keyword I'm going to enter is school family 2014-15. We always recommend sticking that year in there because it makes it easy to say, is this a school family who used to be here or a school family who is here now? I'm going to add it to my keyword list, and I can say the first family is going to be the Bennett family. Add them to the list, and then it's going to be John Brennan. Add him to the list, and I can just keep typing in the names that I'm looking for, and I can do it either by ID number or by name. Once I put everybody in, I can hit next, it shows me my names, I hit next and finish, and that has now been posted back to them. If I didn't want to do it by typing their names in, I could have also done it with that automatic, and that's going to let me either pull up my family selections and tag the families, or go to additional selections and put in a filter to find a group of families to apply that to. So we can do that for our family keywords. We can do it for ID numbers, geographical areas, family pictures, the envelope user checkbox, the second ID number, the send no mail, and the synchronize with diocese. So it's a way of taking same or similar pieces of information and applying them to multiple people at the same time. Processes allow me to affect existing information. So where quick posting is adding new information, processes is affecting existing information. I can go through and delete out families, make groups of families inactive, clear out remarks, move families for information, change letters, do a constant contact email list. So if you have a constant contact account, you can sync your information over to constant contact, compare data, reorder things, and also do an online registration. So the program, starting with version 5, built in online registration forms. Version 7 has the newest one, so you'll see there's an old method and then the new method. And what it lets you do is it lets you create a form. It creates an HTML file. That file can go up onto your email or onto your web page, and then once it's up onto your web page, families can go and visit it. And when they submit it, it emails you a copy of that data, and you can then import it into the program. If the family is already in your program, it's going to update their information. If they are not in your program, it will add their information. So it's a way for people to be able to fill out that registration information without having to submit a paper copy, and for you to be able to pull that information in without having to retype that information. So if you have questions about that, check in with me later. We're happy to walk you through that process. We don't supply the web page. You would have to put that onto yours, but it allows you to do that fairly easily. That is it for family information. Does anybody have questions on families? Okay, we're going to move on to the exciting world of member information. Yay! So if I click on members up here at the top, we're going to be in section 3. We're still on page 1. Section 3 for our member information. So members are the individuals inside of a family. The family we have to have before we can have members or before we can have contributions. So we get our family set up, and then we have our lovely members over here. We should have a member page for every member in the family. So in my family, we have the Mensch family, and then I have a member for Bill and for Amy and for Mike and for Ben. So we're going to have one for whoever we have in that family. When we're looking at the member screen, I have my navigation box up here at the top, just like I did for my families, that allows me to search by different things, it allows me to scroll through by different things, and allows me to see the different members in the family, just like what we saw with the families. Over here we have our add and delete button, so we're going to talk about adding and deleting once we're done with the members, but we'll saw that over back on the family screen as well. I have my family name listed first so I can tell what family I'm in, and then I have my member name. Just like with our families, I have my 3 little black dots at the end, and I can see my member breakdown. This is where we can fill in a middle name, a maiden name, a nickname, title, suffix. So that all gets filled in individually on the member screen. We have the mailing name formats just like we saw with our families. We have our inactive box just like we saw with our families, and our documents box just like we saw with our families. We do have room for an ID number for our members. Most churches do not use this. Where it does get used is if you have somebody in the family who wants to receive envelopes separate from the family. So if you have a spouse who wants to contribute apart from her husband, we can give her her own number. If you have a child in the family who wants to contribute, it is a choice to you to make. If they're in high school, this is a great place to fill in a number for them so they can contribute there. If they are in their 20s, we would recommend that instead of giving them a member envelope number and leaving them underneath of their family, that you would set them up as their own separate family. Most churches tend to do that around like 21, 22. Other people will pick 25 as the cutoff age. It's whatever works for you or in that situation. But instead of setting them up and kind of keeping them underneath of their family, we would consider them to be a separate family who happens to live at the same address as somebody else. Yes?
In relation to that, is there a way through the relationship screen to connect them if they become their own family?
Absolutely. So if that person leaves, I can go over to that relationship section and I can say that this family and use an existing member is related to this family, and I fill in the relationship of parent or child. And I don't have to check that button for courtesy copy or show on directory. It's just going to allow me to keep that relationship to say, okay, they're related to this person through whatever.
And you have to do it on both sides?
When I hit use existing member, and I choose the member that I would want to link them to, we're going to say that they're related to John Brennan. John, there he is. I can say that he is related to this guy, and that the relationship is father, and the reciprocal relationship is son, And this box here for create reciprocal relationship will then automatically create that on John's page along with Robert's page. So it's going to use both of them, so both of them will have it on there. So I only have to fill it in one place, and it fills it in on both.
So Robert is John's father.
Yes. So I can fill
When I
that
looked
in.
at that, it got confusing.
Yeah, I can see how that can happen. But it's one of those things where, no, John is Robert's father, or Robert's John's father?
Exactly.
Robert is father.
Robert is John's father.
John's father.
John is
Yes.
a member.
Because you
Yes.
said use the existing member.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. Either
the
way you
relation-
want to do it, just be consistent. So pick which way makes most sense to you, and then do it that way. So whichever, I could see arguments for either side of it. Just pick which one you would like. And you can see those different things down here at the bottom. And you can
Well,
have
and that's what
multiple.
and I don't understand those tabs either, but I can ask you later.
Yeah, so these tabs, as you add existing or different relationships, because you might have 10 different people, all different related, you would see a different tab for each one of the relationships you filled in. So if you added the mother and then the father, then you add in somebody else, you can have different tabs for it. But you can ask me more later. I'm
Yeah.
going to pick back over in the member section. So again, we have the envelope number if we would want to use it. We have the relationship, that's going to be their relationship to the family, and then we have their type. The type is going to be one of 6 choices, head spouse, adult, young adult, child, or other. You have to pick one of those, and you can't edit that list at all. We have a box here for separate statement. That's if someone has their envelope number filled in and wants to receive their contribution statement separate from the family, we would select that box. Grade or degree is either the grade they're currently in or the highest level of schooling they've completed. If someone has a high school grade, please, or high school degree, don't fill in 12. Fill in something like high school degree. That way we can separate between our current seniors and people who have finished high school. We had a church that accidentally invited a bunch of like 40 and 50-year-olds to a high school lock-in. We don't want to do that, it gets a little creepy. We have our gender. We can have male or female. There are no other choices, and you have to pick one or the other. The default for head of household is to be a male. The default for spouse is to be a female. But any other person that gets added has a default of female. I like to think it's because we're better, but it's because female comes alphabetically first in the list, so it just defaults to that. We have room for marital status, language, ethnicity, religion, disability, occupation, birth date, and deceased. If you notice, all of them have little drop-down boxes. I can add on the fly, meaning if I have a new disability that I want to fill in. If I type it in, it's going to prompt me to add it into my list. So I can do that and add it in as I'm typing. If I made a mistake, I'm always going to have that manage button that's going to allow me to go in and manage that list from there. If you notice, I have blank space here and blank space here. There are 11 user-definable fields that can be turned on in the program. Right now I'm using 3 of them for religion, disability, and occupation. But say I want to be able to keep track of what school the child attends, or I want to be able to keep track of what they've said their mass attendance is, I can come up to File, and to Keywords, and to Member Keywords, and to User Keywords. And these are my user-definable fields. And from here, I can click on my first blank one, and I can say that I want this to be called school, and I want to use it for church. And that field is now going to show up on all of my member screens. So I went to File, and to Keywords, Member Keywords, and User Keywords, and that's going to be in the notes that we send out to you. And it allows me to turn on those user-definable fields. So we have 11 to play with, and you can turn them on or not turn them on however you would like. Turning them on for one member turns them on for every member, so you can't have like 11 ones on this one and then 10 more different ones on a different member. It's the same across all of them. And they're all drop-down boxes. With your date of birth, if you fill it in, their age is going to be automatically calculated based off of today's date, and it adjusts based off of your computer date. So if your computer date says the right date, their age will be correct. If your computer date is wrong, their age will be wrong. Their deceased date, if I fill this in, again I'm hitting T to fill today's date in, it's going to bring up this box, and it's going to say, you mark somebody as deceased. What do you want to do next? This is the deceased date that we filled in. Do we want to change their type from head of household to something else? Do we want to add an entry of deceased to their sacrament list? Because he's the head of household and is listed as married, he has a survivor. Do we want to change her name? Do we want to change her mailing names? Do we want to change her type? Do we want to change her marriage sacrament? Do we want to change her marital status? And because he's also the head of household, it means his name is over on the family screen. Do we want to change the family status? And do we want to change the family's name? So it prompts me through every change I should make based off of the type of member that's died. If it's somebody who's listed as a relationship of child, I'm not going to see survivor and family name because that wouldn't be affected by a child dying in the family. So it prompts me through what changes it thinks I should make once I fill that deceased state in. And then this box is going to change to say inactive and deceased up here at the top. Picture works the same way as on the family screen. We can link a picture to a member. Location made a lot more sense back in the DOS version because it was listed right next to occupation. So it was usually used for the location of the occupation. Now it hangs down in the lower left-hand corner all the time, so people are like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. You can still use it for the location of their occupation. It's a text box and not a drop-down box. So whatever you would like to fill in there, you are more than welcome to. We have remarks just like with our family. We have general, confidential, and we also have special circumstances. If I fill something in under special circumstances, a little red flag will be displayed at the top of the screen to let me know that they have special circumstances. It'll also show up down here at the bottom too. If you are sharing your data between church and formation or school, that special circumstances box is shared between all the programs. General and confidential remarks are not. So if you fill in special circumstances, every other program can see it. If you fill in general or confidential, they can't see it. You can choose to share those fields, but by default they are not shared. But the special circumstances is. Just like with families, we have member keywords that we can use as well. And then coming down the left, we have yet more sections of information. Communication, in older versions this was called phone and email address because it contains the phone and email addresses. Surprising. So we have phone numbers, we have email addresses just like on our family screen. We also have the ability to set up somebody's social media connection, so Facebook, Twitter, or a blog. I'm not sure who has that information, but if they give it to you, you're more than welcome to come in here and fill it in. And it also recaps the phone numbers, email addresses, and addresses over here for us as well. Sacraments is where our sacramental information is stored. We have a general information tab, which is going to let us see the birthplace, birth father, birth mother, mother's maiden name, and saint name. Saint name showed up somewhere in version 6, so if you've not noticed that before. If I'm over on a kid's screen, and I hit use default value, it's going to fill in my head of household and my spouse's name for me, so I don't have to retype that, assuming that the head and the spouse are this kid's actual parents. The baptism tab, confirmation, marriage, first communion, penance, all of these are relatively the same. Some of it's going to change slightly depending on them. We have room for the baptismal name, the date it was performed, and again, we can choose that approximate date. The status, the additional status, who it was performed by, where it was performed, has it been verified, do we have a copy of the certificate on file, what's the volume, page, and entry in our hardbound books, notes, and sponsor information. So there's lots of stuff you can fill in. The only thing you should definitely fill in is that status. A lot of times when people are registering, you're getting a yes or a no on whether or not they've had a sacrament done. Maybe a date that they're sort of kind of think is correct. A lot of times you're not getting anything more than that. So you can feel free just to fill the status in. If your church is performing the sacrament, fill in the information. It's not that hard to fill it in. You have it in there and it makes it very easy to get certificates out down the road. You can quick post sacramental information. So when you have a first communion class that comes through, I can use the quick posting process to say, these 10 kids, this first communion date, done by this person, at this church, done, and I'm not typing it 10 times, I'm typing it once. So that quick posting process allows me again to get that information quickly onto their screens without retyping the same thing over and over again. The volume and page, you can set that up to auto number, so if you do it in the same order that they're going into the book, it'll auto fill that information in for you. You just have to tell it where to start and how many entries are on a page. If you notice down here at the bottom, let's see if I can find somebody who has a sacrament. Okay. So this person got baptized at BBM. in West Grove, I could come down and hit my print certificate button, and I can choose to do my baptismal certificate. Click next. I'm going to pick and next and preview. And here's my lovely sacramental certificate for this person. It has the front page, and I'm able to print that out for them. So you can print it on the cardstock or something else like that, but it has copies of our certificates in there for all of them. They have like a scripty font. You can always modify those as well if you don't like the scripty font or you want a graphic on there or something like that. We can make those look however you would like, but instead of having to do them in Word and then, mail merge or whatever, we can do them all through the program. We can do them individually from a member screen, or we can do them as a group through the report section, depending on what we're looking for. The date list at the very end shows me anything that's been filled in for this person, so I can look here to see all of them. The marriage has an extra special thing. Let me see if I can find somebody with a marriage. Here we go. So Victoria something is married to a lovely person, I'm sure, but he dies. So I drop this down and I change your status from yes to widowed. And I hit save. And oh no, it's disappeared. And I think I've done something wrong, and I type it in again, and I try it again, and it disappears again and again and again. It's not necessary, it's actually disappearing, but it's not being lost. Over here on the date list, I'm going to see that marriage still listed here. So when we change it to marriage from annulled or to widowed, it's going to pop over here on a date list, but it's going to clear off of that marriage screen. And it does that so I can fill in another marriage. So that way if this person gets remarried, I can fill in that marriage. And I can keep repeating that process as many times as I need to. We had one lady with 8 annulments on her record. It'll keep track of all 8 of them. It makes no judgment. Do that to somebody else. It just lets us fill the data in. So if I were here and I did this accidentally, if I change this back to yes, it's going to fill it back in over on the marriage screen. So I'm able to correct it if I want to. So it's not losing it, it's just storing it over on the date list and not here. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, how can I print out a sacramental certificate for somebody who is no longer in the program? Back up here on my family screen, I have a family set up that's called loose. So the envelope number is bracket, which is the one to the right of your P, and then the word loose, and the name is bracket loose as well. Has nothing to do with their morals. It's for keeping track of loose contributions that come in. So we have this loose family set up in here. By default, they're not included on family reports, so it makes them a very great test family. So anything you want to try out, throw it onto loose, because it's not going to mess anything up. So we have the loose family, and in the loose family, we can create a loose member. So I'm going to create this person here, and they're going to be called loose as well. So my lovely loose family, my lovely loose member. So I have my loose member, I come over to sacraments, and I have called my church and I said, hey, I got baptized there 35 years ago. I know I'm not in the program anymore, but I need a copy of my baptismal certificate because I'm getting married, I'm doing whatever. I can come over just to the sacrament section, and under general information, I say, what's your date of birth? What's your birthplace? Who's your birth father? Who's your mother? I come to baptism. I say, okay, what was your baptismal name? Where I've looked it up in the book. What was the date it was done? Under additional status, if I just hit P, it fills in performed here, and it's going to automatically choose your church's information under place. If I want, I can say who it was performed by. I don't know if that's in your book or not. And then I can say, if I want to, fill in the sponsor information, and now I hit print certificate. I choose my certificate, I hit next, and preview. And here's my certificate. I can print it out, it's ready to go. If you notice back here, I clicked through it really quickly. There is an option to do, hold on. Certificate, full page and back. To print just the front, just the back, or both the front and the back, which requires a duplex printer, but it'll print the notations out on the back side. So first communion, confirmation, marriage. So you can have those all on one certificate or just on the back side. I can preview that, I can print it. There's the back page, what that looks like. and it would allow me to print out that person's certificate. Once I'm done printing it, I just hit the delete baptism button down at the bottom. It blanks it out for the next time I have somebody call and need that, and then I just type the information in again. So that loose person I kind of use as a placeholder for printing out that information when I don't have somebody in the program still. If you're using the Sacramento Register, you can do it because it would keep it without deleting them. But for most churches, this is the easiest way to be able to do that and not have to pull out the typewriter or go into a Word document and do something like that. So our sacraments are across there. Under sacraments, we have talents and ministries. Talents are meant to be hobbies or skills that you have that you're volunteering to the church. I do woodworking, I do baking, I'm available for carpool. Ministries are meant to be organizations that you're a part of. I'm a lector, I'm a Eucharistic minister, I'm on the choir, I'm on the finance committee, I'm a Knights of Columbus, whatever it would be. You can fill in the ministry or the talent. You can fill in a status, active, chairperson, whatever, a start date and an end date, although most churches just use the ministry name or the talent name. And most churches keep this for current people as opposed to for historical people, although you can use that status, start date, and end date if you want to keep track of it that way. So it just depends on what it is that you're looking to do. Just like with our sacramental information, we can quick post talent and ministry information. If we decide we want to start using this, we get a list from whoever manages that, and we can quick post all of that in. We have attendance. Most places don't ever use it until we get some sort of like easy pass system set up. We're not keeping track of mass attendance, but you could use it to keep track of Bible studies or pre-Caner, pre-Jordan classes, things like that. Family recap is the same thing as over on the family screen. It just shows us the member and it shows us our contributions. If you notice, this family's given like $32,000 this year. Again, it's because it's our loose family, and we use it to keep track of all of that money that we can't attribute to somebody else in the program. Safe environment allows us to do background check or other requirement information. We can use whatever company we do use and fill it in here. You can also work with a company, I think Secure Search does it, that you can request a search from them. Most places already have something that they use for that, but you can record that information in here. Letters, visits, etc. again would be correspondence with this person. This is where we could do sick calls or things like that if we wanted to keep track of it. Just like with our family screen, we have the listing screen option. I have my same customized button. I have my same active, inactive, or both options down at the bottom. Works the exact same way. We do have a section here called Easy Lists, along with our reports. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. And we have our quick posting and our processes. There are more quick posting options for members than there are for families. Sacramental, grades and degrees, talents, ministries, attendance, keywords, user-defined keywords. User-defined keywords are those 11 user-definable fields, or religion, disability, occupation, school, any of those fields that we would turn on, we can quick post to. Yes?
If you do a posting of a grade, will it automatically update every year, like if you put in second grade?
We're going to see that in 1 second, so hold that question. Member pictures, background information, legal requirements. So again, this allows us to add new data in. The processes section is where it's going to allow us to update existing information. And the first one there is our grade promotion process. So the reason this does not run automatically, we have to tell it to run, is that schools update all over the place. So if you're in North Carolina, their grades go up in July because that's when they start school. If you're in New Jersey, they go up in August. If you're somewhere else, they may go up in May. So instead of automatically having it go, this just tells us when you want it to go. So we click on grade promotion, and it's going to say what grade do you want to start with, what grade do you want to end with. 13, and it's going to say, here's where we think they should go. So pre-3 is going to go to pre-3A. Maybe instead of going to pre-3A, that should go to kindergarten. I can drop down and choose whichever grade it should go to, and then it runs through and it does everybody in here at one time. If you are sharing your data with school or with formation, this process runs for everybody in the entire database, regardless of which program they show up in. So if someone is just in school, it's going to run them for school, even if you're doing this in church. If someone is in formation and in church, it's going to run it for that person once, so that way people don't bump up multiple grades if they're in multiple programs, and they don't get missed if they're in a different program from yours. As long as the data is shared between them, you only have to do this in one program, not each of them. You do not want to choose this option for change type to young adult until they get to high school. This process only works on people who have a type of child. So if I change an 8th grader to young adult, they're never going to leave 8th grade through the grade promotion process. So you only want to choose that change type once they're going out of high school if you want to do it at all. But you don't want to do it before then, otherwise the grade promotion process won't work. Yeah.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Yeah.
If it is shared among church formation and school, and I've not even looked at any of this in our system, is church the only one that can change that? And if not, how do you know if it's been changed already?
So say I run through and I do my grade promotion, and then formation goes to do it. It's going to give me a note up here at the top, last performed, not yet performed. If I'm doing this and I've already done it, it's going to say last performed such and such a date. If it's less than a year since, it's going to pop up a separate warning message saying it's been less than a year since this process has been done. Are you sure you want to do it? So it'll warn you against having to do it. If you're sharing your data between school, formation, and church, the best program to run it from is formation. The reason being is that formation has 2 different grade fields. They have the school grade field, which is what church and school use, and they also have the formation grade field. Because with formation, you could be in a school grade of 3, but in a religious ed grade of 2 or 4. So they have 2 grade fields that get promoted, and when they do it there, they can bump up both at the same time. If you do it in church, they have to go back and do the formation one, but they can do it separately, but it just makes it easier if they do it. So that's usually who we would recommend to run it through. But it will warn you if you try to do it within a year of having done it already. So with the processes, we can also activate or inactivate, delete remarks, erase attendance, change talents, change ministries, or change our letters, similar to what we can do with the family. So again, quick posting adds new information, processes changes existing information. Do we have any questions with members? Okay, yes?
If you have a member that's a child that's becoming a new family,
Yes.
you just add them over.
No. So when we have someone, so for example, we have this person who calls up and says, hey, I want to start getting my own envelopes. I say, how old are you? And they say, 25. And I say, how about we set you up as your own new family? I could leave them underneath of their family and then go over and create a brand new family and retype in all of their information. That is not the best way to do it. Instead, what I can do, I'm just going to grab somebody who's actually active. So this person's 17, and they've become emancipated from their family, and they're going to move out and have their own thing. Over here on the left-hand side, I have a button that says Reassign Member. This is the button we want to use. When I click Reassign Member, it gives me 2 options. I can either create a new family from this person, or I can move them to another existing family. So when we're setting somebody up as their own separate family, we want to choose the first option. I can give them an ID number, and I can choose to copy over the address and phone number from the old family. So if they're still living at home, this is easy. I fill in whatever number they're going to have. So I'm going to give this person envelope number 2, and I say Reassign Member, and now they're their own brand new member. They're the head of household for that family, and we're ready to go. So I can change him from being child to head, and now he's good to go, and he's going to get his own envelopes and whatever other information. Yeah?
But that does not create any relationship?
It does not. So it's just moving him over. If I want to create that relationship, I can go over to the family page and relationships and set that up there. If it was a case where I have a divorced family, we're splitting kids back and forth, or I have a case where it's a happier thing and it's a marriage, and I'm combining 2 families, I can move them to an existing family, so I can say that this person is going to go over to this family over here. So it allows me to either create a brand new family for them, or to put them into another existing family. But it's not going to auto-create a relationship. That is not a bad idea, though. If you go to PDS's website, it's parishdata.com, and you go to the client portal section, there's an option on the left that says enhancement requests, and they're always very happy for people to fill in an enhancement request idea. So if you say, wouldn't it be great if it could do this? Then you can say, I think it'd be great if when I do new member, it creates an automatic relationship for them. So fill that in. It's a great option for it to have. And you can do that with anything. Yes?
I apologize to you, but I'm new and this system is totally new.
Mhm.
The ID number, where do you get that from?
It depends on your church. Most churches, the church picks the number that they want to use. Some churches, the envelope number assigns it. So it's going to depend on how you work with your envelope company. Our Sunday Visitor tends to be more of an assigning envelope company. REME tends to be more of a church picks an envelope company, but each church has their own relationship with an envelope company. So it depends on that.
Okay, I just tend to
Yeah.
get lost as to when the diocesan number should be used.
The diocesan number gets, I have no idea. I have no idea how you get the diocesan number. I know that it's there, but I'm not quite sure how that gets there.
When you go into the master address change file.
Yeah, I understand the diocesan, but I didn't understand the relationship. What I didn't know was that one system does not talk to the other.
Yeah, no.
No.
You have to go back in.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions on members? Yes?
Well, when you do the reassign the
Uh-huh.
member to go to an existing
Yep.
family, does everything get moved over there as far as the sacraments?
Everything from that member gets moved with it.
And the old one stays the same if only one member of that family would get moved?
So if I have family A with mom and dad and 2 kids,
Right.
and then I take dad and set him up as his own separate family.
Now, he's moving to another family.
Okay, so I'm moving him over. It's going to leave mom, kid, and dad's going to be over here. Anything having related to dad is gone. So dad's over here, all of his sacraments, ministries, talents have come with him. There's no record of him left in that old family.
It's all moved to the new.
It's all moved to the new
existing
family.
family.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. If that person, the member, has their own member ID number, or if it's the last person in that family, it'll give you an option to move financial information as well. So if that member has their own envelope number, they've contributed underneath of it, it'll move that envelope number's contributions along with them. If they're the last person in the family, so it's a single person here and a single person here, and we combine them together, it'll move that person's contributions along with them to the new family. But only if it's the last person or they have their own ID number. Any other member questions?
Okay, I have a question on that. Okay, once you have the parent's name in, how do you get the child?
Okay, so let me show you adding a family. So when I come in, I'm adding a brand new family into the program.
Okay,
I'm going to hit
now-
Add Family button up at the
Right.
top, and I'm going to add myself in. So we're going to give me envelope number. Let me pick a number here. Available 22. So I'm just filling in my name.
Not that much, okay?
And it's going to default to add the husband and default to add the spouse as members.
Okay.
I hit apply OK. I fill in whatever other information I have. I come over to members.
Oh.
Here's my head. I fill in whatever information I know for him.
Okay.
I can come over to the spouse, fill in whatever information I have for her. And now I need to add the kids in. I'm going to hit the add member button up here at the top. And it's going to confirm that this is the family I want to add it to. And then I'm going to type in the
Okay.
information.
Okay.
And then I can fill in his stuff. It's going to default them, I believe, to child. And I can fill in whatever other information.
Okay.
And then I can hit add member again, confirm that it's the right family, and fill in,
So it's just keep adding.
yeah, until I have them all in. So depending on how many people you have. If it's the Hosannas, you got 10 people to add. You don't have the Hosannas, but that's who jumps into my head when I think lots of kids. So you can do that as many times as you need, depending on the number of members. But you only have to hit add member for the not for the house, not for the spouse, not for the head, not for the spouse, just for the kids.
Yeah, I knew how to get those
Yep.
in. It was like, how do I put the kids in?
Yep, so it's the add button up here at the top. Talking about adding and deleting. When we want to delete a family out of the program. So I'm in here and I move and I'm in a different parish. Or you kick me out because I'm an awful person. Whatever happens. I hit delete family and it's going to say, are you sure you want to delete? And we're going to say, yes, I'm sure. And then it's going to say, do you want to print your information? And you can say yes or no depending on what you want to do. And then it's going to ask me, do you want to keep this information without showing it? Always, always, always say yes. Saying yes is archiving that information. So think about it like sending it to purgatory. They did something to get there, but they're going to be able to get back out again. So I say, yes, I want to keep the information without showing it. When I look in the program, the family's gone. When I run a report, the family is gone. I can't find them, I can't do anything with it. But when I hit add family, it shows me my list of all of my archive families, and lo and behold, there I am right there. And if I come back because I'm a better person, or I move back to the parish, or you accidentally deleted me in the first place, I can click on me and I can say use this family. It's going to say which members do I want to pull back in. I can choose all 4 of my members, and I can say use the marked members, and I'm right back in again like I never left in the first place. Yes?
When you delete like that,
Mhm.
it's there and keeps the financial information as well?
The financial information is archived, so it's still saved, it's just not in the program. Yep. So it's saved, you wouldn't be able to include it on a report unless you pull them back in again, but it archives all the family, all the contribution, and all the member information. So it's a great way of keeping that. If you think about it like an Excel spreadsheet, I'm going to pull one up. So the way that the program works is we have a column here that says name, church, school, formation. So we have the Mensch family, the Smith family, Jones family. And I'm in church and formation, they're just in school, and they're in church and school. And then we're going to have the family, and they're just in church. So when I delete someone out of one of the programs, all it's doing at first is unchecking this box for church. It's saying, you're not in the church program anymore. If I left church and I'm in both church and formation, when I delete from church, it's not going to give me another box. It's just basically not going to show me in that program anymore, but my data's still in there. If I delete myself then from formation, I am going to get that box because I'm not in any of the programs anymore. And it's going to say, do you want to keep this row? So keep all the information regarding to this family and just not show it anywhere, or do you want to delete this row entirely and get rid of all of that information? So saying yes is keeping that row, just not having that box checked. Saying no is deleting that entirely. So that no is the sending them to hell option. They are gone, they are done, they are not coming back. So the yes is purgatory, the no is hell, and we want to pick purgatory every time because it's going to allow us to pull that back in. And you would be surprised at the number of people who delete the wrong person accidentally. Or else the person decides they're not moving or whatever. We want to be able to have that option to get them back in. Also, if they come back and ask for a tax statement a couple years down the road, we can pull them back in, print it out, and then delete it out again. So it's always the best option. The only time we would ever say to hit no is if you've typed in something gibberish or you have a blank family or something like that, and it's bad data, then go ahead, you don't need to archive that. But otherwise, we'd always choose that archiving option. And we're going to have that for both the families and the members. Contributions, yes?
So if you've deleted it from church, it will only delete it from church, but not from formation?
Correct.
Even if they're all synced together?
Correct.
Okay.
So when you add and delete, adding and deleting do not automatically add or delete from the other programs. So if we look back at that spreadsheet, and I add myself to church, I am not automatically added to formation. The reason being is that not everybody that gets added to church is registering in formation, and not everybody that registers in formation is the church family. So it only adds them to the program you're adding them to. When they would go into formation and hit add family, they would see that family and they can suck them in. So we can suck into the other programs. And the deleting works the same way. If somebody leaves formation, it doesn't mean they left church. So deleting them from there does not delete them from church, and vice versa. So adding and deleting have to be done separately in each program. Contributions. Are you ready for contributions? Money! Woo! So contributions. We have funds set up in the program. And I'm going to pull up my fund setup screen so you can see what I'm talking about. When we create a fund, we create a couple things along with it. So most churches, Fund 1 is your church contributions. Fund 9 is your diocesan contributions. The reason it's like that, if you're ever wondering, back in the old versions of the programs, you could have 9 funds. They set up 1 for church and 9 for diocesan so they could keep the money as far apart as possible. So that's why they were there. But most of you kept your old fund numbers, that tends to be what they are. If you've added them since the old DOS programs, it tends to be 1 and 2, but it can be whatever you would like. So we have a fund number, and underneath of that fund, we have groups and we have activities. Activities are what we actually post to. Groups are just ways of organizing them. So if you think about having a filing cabinet is your fund. Those file folders are going to be your activities, and the groups are going to be the drawers. So you can kind of reshuffle things around. It just depends on how you want to look at it. We also have periods. Periods are typically the calendar year or the fiscal year that you're working with. Almost every church goes from January to December for their regular church contributions. If you're working with a school tuition fund, it's usually going to be based off of your billing period. So for ABVN's data, they run from July through June. If you're working with a capital campaign, it's typically going to be multiple years. So it might be from 2016 or 2015, and there's a weird, 2012 to 2014, just depending on what that's going to be. So it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 3 years. So those are going to adjust depending on the type of fund. Most of the time, calendar year, January to December, with school tuition being different and capital campaigns being different. With our activities, we can have as many different ones as we would want in each fund. So we can have an activity for each of our different collections. So your offering collection, your Easter, your Christmas, your Holy Day, your Mother's Day, your Father's Day, if you have an air conditioning repair or a heater repair or snow removal, any of those different things we can have a different activity for. If we're looking at our diocesan funds, we can have, Holy Day or Peter Pence and Black and Indian missions and Eastern Europe and tsunami relief or whatever different funds or activities it is that we're going to collect for them. And we can add in as we're going, so we can always come in and add in additional activities. It's this little insert button down here at the bottom that lets me add in another line. And we can have as many of those as we would like to. Our contributions are stored by family. So if I'm back over here under contributions, these are all of the Bennett's contributions. And I'm looking at their most current fund by default. So when I come in, I'm going to default to look at my first fund and the newest period for it. So I'm looking at the Benefits Fund 114, and here's all the donations that they've given. My rates, history, and keywords screen, which is the one that I'm on, is going to show me the line-by-line listings of everything that I posted to them. If you want to know what they gave in total, you don't have to do math. You can click the Recap Total button over here on the left, and it's going to show me that they've given $110, and they gave all of that to the offering. So if I pull up Brennan's, I can see they gave $2,300, they gave $2,050 to offering, $50 to Ascension, $100 to Solemnity of Mary, and $100 to Ash Wednesday. The frequency column is telling me how many donations they made. They made 26 donations to the offering, 1 to Ascension, 1 to Assumption, and 1 to Ash Wednesday. So it's showing me frequency, activity, and then total. The right-hand side of the screen is showing me the monthly breakdown. So it's showing me they gave $500 in January, $400 in February, $550 in March. So I can see kind of their giving pattern across that. If I was looking at a tuition fund instead of looking at another fund, I'm going to see a due and a paid and a balance. So for tuition, they currently don't owe anything. If I look at their grand totals, they still owe $1,700 over the course of this tuition period. So I can look at it either for how much they owe right now or how much they owe over the life of that fund. So it's just letting me see the recap information. The other tab we have for contributions is billing address. That's going to be if someone other than the registered family should receive bills that would be associated with that fund. So for a capital campaign, if you have a matching gift set up and somebody else should be getting the bill, I can fill that in. If it's school tuition and the grandparents are paying the tuition, I can fill that information in. So we're able to set up a different billing address with it. Most of the time that's not coming up, and for regular church contributions it really doesn't have any bearing. So I have my information in here. I can always come in and manually add in contributions or adjust contributions from here. So if somebody walks into the church office and hands me $10 and I want to record it in here, I can come in and just hit the insert button and add that in. This will get recorded in that log that we talked about back at the beginning, so there is an audit trail, but there wouldn't be a batch report for it. So if your office wants you to have a batch report that totals up with every donation that we put in, you don't want to do it that way, but if they don't care about that, you can certainly come in and add it. You would not want to do that for all the money you get on a Sunday because it would take you a really long time. Instead, we use the quick posting process to add in new contributions. We do that on the left by coming over to quick postings, and we would choose the option for payment and donation entry. It's going to pull up my options screen. We can post by ID number and name, ID number only, name only, second ID number only. We can choose to post check numbers, post comments, or print receipts. Normally, we don't have those checked. We can choose to repeat items from the previous entry. Normally, we would want fund, date, and activity, but not amount, because the amount is usually different by each envelope. We can choose to have a print a receipt for every entry, to total up our ID numbers, or to automatically check for duplicate entries. We can choose to export out totals to Ledger or to QuickBooks. And we can choose to post member attendance based off of the envelopes, which we would not recommend because you don't know which person in the family actually gave the envelope and whether or not they were actually there. You can also do vocal confirmation. If you have a particularly technologically challenged person doing your entries who you don't trust to type what's on the envelope, you can turn that on and it will repeat back to them everything that they type in. If you can type, I would not recommend doing that because you're going to type in the envelope number. It's going to read back 1, 2, 3, 4. And you go over the amount, $10, and you go down to the next one. And it would get very old very quickly, but if you want, you can turn that on. I'm going to say use OK. It's going to remember those settings for the next time I come in. I choose my fund number. I choose my fund year. I choose my date, so it was 7/27 for this past Sunday. I choose my activity. All of my activities are going to be in that list. And I come to my envelope number, I type my envelope number in, and I press enter, and I type in my amount, and I press enter, and it takes me down to the next one. Once I put in the envelope number, it is going to display the family's name for me up at the top along with their address. I have the ability to add or change rates if it's a tuition or a capital campaign. I have the ability to view the history to see what they've given previously. So if they forgot to fill in the amount on their envelope, I can look and guess it was probably a $50 donation based off of their giving history. And I can also change their address or view their member. So if they've marked an address change on their screen, I can change that right from here. I'm going to fill in the same dollar amount again. And it's going to pop up and say duplicate entry found. Do I want to keep this entry? And I can say yes or no. It's because it's the same date, the same activity, and the same amount. That's why I'm getting that box. This is that option underneath the options and automatically check for duplicate entries. If you have families where they give you 5 envelopes stapled together and they're all for $5, you probably don't want to have that option turned on because you're going to have to keep saying yes on every one, or you could have done the math and said that it's one entry for $30 is whatever you want to do. But most of the time I just post them as they come across them and not try to keep them together. So you can keep coming down through here. I would go to my next family and I can do it by name as opposed to by envelope number and the amount that they gave, and just keep coming down through my list. My options button at the bottom would take me back to my options screen if I wanted to turn on check numbers for some checks at the end. If I wanted to print out a couple receipts, I can do that as well. My save button just saves the screen where I'm at. We would recommend hitting that every 50, 100 entries, however you are. If you have some place where your internet is wacky or your network connection is wacky, hitting that more often is helpful. You go to take a phone call, hit the save button, take your call, and come back to it. That way, if something were to happen, you're not going to lose what you've put in so far. The finish later button is father calls and says, I need you to get out of the program, I need you to go to the bank, or I need you to go do this and stop what you're doing. I can say finish later. It's going to say you're working on batch 3341. Are you sure you want to finish later? I say yes. I can come out. And the next time I come back in, I can close the program down, the machine down, whatever. It's going to say, hey, you started this batch and you didn't finish it. This is the batch. These are the entries in it. Do you want to delete and start over? Do you want to ignore it and start a new one? Or do you want to continue on with what you were doing? I say continue, and I can continue posting. So it hasn't posted it yet. It's just pausing for me to come back to later. Once I'm finished with everything, I'm going to say post to families and members. It's going to say, are you ready to post? I'm going to say yes. And it's going to say, are you ready to print? And I want to say yes. We would always recommend printing out your batch copies One, it's a helpful backup in case something were to ever happen to your data. Two, it's good for the diocese to be able to say, here's what I put into PDS, here's what I deposited into the bank. You can make sure that those things match up. We're seeing more and more people who don't want to have a paper copy of it, just because it's a lot of paper to have sitting around. What do I do with it? It's just kind of sitting there. We have a solution for you. So I'm going to leave it set for this print detailed and orders entered. I hit print. It's going to bring me up to this screen. Instead of hitting print, I'm going to hit preview. I preview my report. This is what a batch report looks like. It's going to have all the entries for me, and then the second page is just going to have a total. Once I've previewed it, and this works for any report in the entire program, once the report has been previewed and I hit my print button, in the lower left-hand corner, I have an option for print to file. I choose print to file. The default type is Adobe Acrobat or a PDF file. And then the where is just where I want to save it. So you can set up a folder on your server that's called batch reports. And I'm going to date, I'm going to say this is 2014-07-31-3334. And I hit save, and I hit OK. And instead of getting a paper copy, now I have a PDF copy of it. It's saved onto my server. If I want to print it out, I can. If I want to print out just that last page, I can. But now I have a digital version of it that can live on forever on my server. And I have that if I ever need to look back at it, but I don't have a bunch of papers sitting around that are just going to get shredded or thrown out down the road. So it allows me just to keep it a little bit more easily. So it's an option that you would have, but that print to file command is available from any report. Once you've previewed the report, you can do that. And you can print to a PDF document, you can print to a Word document, you can print to an Excel document, depending on what you're looking for with that. Once you've posted your report or your batch, you have your information back on your families, and you say, oh no, I've made a mistake. Somebody is always going to make a mistake. Not every batch, but at least once in their lifetime they're going to make a mistake. There's the simple mistake. I posted this amount for $25 and it should have been for $250. Maybe it's not a simple mistake, but it's a mistake. I come back into the family, I type in my correction, I hit save, I'm good to go. Maybe the mistake that I made is I made the same mistake through the whole batch. I posted these for the 27th, they were really for the 13th. I posted these to offering, they were really supposed to be for a holy day. I could go in individually and correct the information, or I could come to processes and move fund entries. Move fund entries allows me to correct an entire batch at once. I'm going to tell it what I posted to, and then tell it what I want to change it to. So I'm going to say I posted it to Fund 114. I posted it for July 27th. I posted it to offering. And I want to change it to July 20th. I want to keep the same fund, I want to keep the same activity. I hit next, and it's going to find any of the donations that match what I filled in at the top. There's a lot of families in this database. I think there's like 4,000. Maybe more. It finds the donations that match it. If I didn't want to move all of them, I can uncheck or check the ones that I specifically want to move. I hit next and finish, and those have all been corrected from being the 27th to being the 20th. The third type of mistake is the I have no idea what I did, I just know it was wrong mistake. And that's where we have the delete batch command. So the move fund entries corrects the batch, the delete fund entries removes the entire batch. So all I had to do is come in and fill in the batch number that I want to take out, and it would delete out all of the entries associated with that batch. So we can correct individually, we can move a group of entries, or we can delete everything out and start over, depending on what we're looking to do. Yeah, we got 10 more minutes. Okay. So that's contributions. Are there questions on contributions? Okay. The other thing that we have, so that was section 4. Section 5 is the dashboard. So if you're looking on your paper, we're at the very bottom of page number 2. Underneath of our information section, we have this little guy here called dashboard. And dashboard showed up in version 6 of the program. And the dashboard is a way of looking at statistical information. So we're just looking at big picture data. Dashboard figures are based off of active families who don't have a date left parish filled in. So this family is going to show up in the dashboard. This family is not because they're marked as inactive. This family, if I filled this in but didn't mark them as inactive, because this is filled in, they're still not going to show up on that dashboard. So they have to be active and have no date left parish filled in to show up or be counted as part of this. So the dashboard is going to tell you the version you're running, the first time the program was run, the last time a backup was made, the last time a fix was run, your number of families, and your number of members. And again, active only and don't have date left parish filled in. This family count is going to show you, because it's a sample data, it doesn't have any really fluctuations in it, but yours you can kind of see ups and downs depending on how many families you've added and deleted. This is my city breakdown, so it's showing me I have 981 families in West Grove, I have 455 families in Lincoln University, 265 in Avondale, and it's also going to show me what those cities represent over here on this little guy. With any of these, you can print them, you can copy them to the clipboard, you can export them as a CSV or as a bitmap, so if you wanted to use them as a graphic in something else, you can do that. This one here is my financial payment graph, so I can see the green fund is my school tuition, so they get a lot more money in August than they do any other time of the year. The red one is my church contributions. You can usually see it spike up around Christmas time and then again around Easter time, so you can kind of see that money as it's coming in. And again, you have those same options there. This update button down here would send it to run through to update the statistics. So if you've done a lot of changes and you want to see how that affects your data, that'll rerun those numbers. Over on the left, you have dashboard setup. This is going to allow you to pick which graphs you want displayed and how often you want it to update your information. So right now, I'm looking at the family count, city breakdown, financial payment. I could also add in sections, so I can look at zip codes, family statuses, family keywords, age, ethnicity, grade, member keyword, ministries, language, religion, talent, or user-defined. That user-defined is going to be the religion, disability, occupation as user-definable keywords that we have in there. So it's going to allow me to set those up and choose them here. This button down here at the bottom is the ability to have it update automatically every 7 days. What that means is every 7th day that you've opened the program, when you go to open it, it's going to say updating statistics. If your updating statistics takes 30 seconds, leave that checked. If your updating statistics takes 5 minutes, I would uncheck that, because there is no way to cancel that process once it starts. So if somebody comes in and they need you to print out something and you go to open it up and it says updating statistics, you just got to sit there and wait until it's done. So for some people, it's no problem. For other people, it takes a long time and they're too impatient. You can come in here and uncheck that box so you don't have to wait for it.
Does that apply to the whole system or to just workstation?
It's the whole system. So because it's whichever workstation comes in first is going to see that updating statistics. So if I open mine up on that 7th day, the first, I'm going to have to sit through it. The next person who opens it up won't. So it just depends on whoever opens it up first. The same way when you're running a backup, that if you have it set to backup every day, it's whoever opens the program up first that morning is going to see it. And you can also set a filter by ID number. So if you have envelope number is 600,000 and above, or out of parish people that I have in here for a capital campaign or some other reason, I can tell it only look for envelope numbers 1 through 599999 and not ever count those other people when I'm looking at my statistical information. So it's just a way of looking at that as a graph. Most people tend to say, hey, isn't that cool, and then never look at it again. But if you want to do more with it, it's there if you'd like to. The last section that I'm going to fit in super fast is this last page, our database procedures, backing up our data. Backing up is super important. I can always reinstall your program. I can't help you with your data if you don't have a copy of it. You want to make sure that it's backed up, and we have 2 different ways that we want to make sure it's backed up. One is the automatic backup options in the program. In version 7, it's under File and Backup. In the older versions, there's a backup option up at the top. But there's a section that says Backup Options. You can choose what days you want to have that automatic backup done. Pick them all. That's our recommendation. You can always cancel the automatic backup, unlike the updating statistics. What it does is the first time the program's opened up in the morning, it's going to automatically run a backup. Those backups are archived on your server so that it's going to filter back through. So it keeps 2 weeks worth in the week folder. Once it's filled that up, it moves one of them back to the month folder. It keeps, I think, 4 or 5 in the month folder, then it filters them back into the quarter folder, and from the quarter folder back into the year folder. So it's keeping backups for either 3 years, 5 years, or 1 year, 3 years, or 7 years, depending on if you pick minimum, moderate, or maximum. Most people are at moderate, which means that if I realize 3 months from now that I deleted all of Fund 1 for everybody, I could go back and restore that data from 3 months ago. So it gives me protection from stupid things that I do. So the automatic backup is to protect yourself from your own data errors. Something goes horribly, horribly wrong with our data, we can restore back. It's not being overwritten. So that's a great way of protecting ourselves, but it's by default going to say where your data is stored on your server, which is the easiest way to do it. But if your server crashes, all of your backups have crashed along with it. So we want to make sure that you're doing an external backup as well. You could do that by changing where that archive folder is. So in that backup options, it says where should that archive folder be. The default is on your server. You could say that this is going to go directly onto whatever backup drive that we use, and we want it to back up directly to there. But what most places do is once a week, they run a backup onto a specific device. They plug in a USB key, and they back up to that. We recommend doing that at least once a week, and we would recommend rotating through theirs in case one of them goes bad. With most places, we recommend doing it after you post, since that's something that you do once a week. So post your contributions, back up your data. But other places do it differently. Or if you have a backup that's running already on your server, just make sure that they're including your PDS information, and then it's being run by whatever does that. But we want to make sure that we have that archival backup for mistakes that might happen inside of your data, and then an external backup for hardware failures in case your server goes down. Any questions about backups? Okay. Checking for program updates. If you're using version 7, when you come into the program, it'll prompt you if there's a new update available. There'll be a little text message right here that says new update available. You just have to click on it. If you're using an older version of the program, you'll either have a button that says online resources, and you can click on check for program updates, or it might be under file and check for program updates. We want to make sure that you update as often as you can. If you need to correct your license information, in version 7, it's under file, setup, and license information. If you're in version 6, it's under setup admin and license information. If you're in older versions than that, quite frankly, I don't remember. I think it's under file and license information. The license information, if it has a little red asterisk, you can't change it, so the church name, site number, registration. But you can adjust addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, web page information. When you print out letters and it has letterhead stuff at the top, this is where that data is coming from. So if you have the phone number or the web page or something that you want included, this is where you can adjust that information. If you would ever need to change your license name for some reason, you can contact us and we can adjust that for you, assuming that it's for, if you merge churches, we can do it for that or something. Keyword cleanup. So this is section D. We have all of these super awesome drop-down lists, which make it easy for doing reports and easy for entering our data because they don't have to keep typing West Conshohocken every time I'm adding in somebody who lives in West Conshohocken. But we can also end up with mistakes. So you can see we have Lincoln University space PA, Lincoln University no space PA. I have 2 of them in here, so if I'm trying to find people who live in Lincoln University, do I want the one for the first Lincoln University or the second Lincoln University? If I click on my Manage button here, it's going to take me over to that keyword list. I could have also gotten to it by clicking File and Keywords, or in version 6, Setup Admin and Keywords, or in the older versions, just the keywords up at the top. And I can pull up my city and state list. So you can see I have everybody here, and I can come down to that Lincoln University. There we go. I can see both of them here. If I were to delete one of them, anybody who had that city would now have a blank city. So I've ruined some of my data by taking that out. I have a better list, but I've messed up some of my families. Instead, I can use the combine button. And I can say, I want to combine my bad Lincoln University I had to pick one that's in the yellows. Lincoln. And I can pick my good Lincoln University over here. And I can say, add to list of changes below. And I can put in as many different duplicates as I have into my list at once, so I can say this Lebanon should go with this one or whatever. I hit combine OK. It fixes my whole database. Anybody that had the bad version now has the good version, and the bad version is gone altogether. So it allows me to correct and update my whole program with 3 keystrokes instead of having to go to each family individually. And that'll work for any of our drop-down lists. The one that's usually the worst is your sacrament place list. That is also the only one that's not in the same section. So with version 7, you'd go to File and Sacrament Setup to find it. In version 6, it's the setup options at the top and then sacrament place names and addresses. So it's the only list that's separate from the rest of the keyword ones, but it also tends to be the most ridiculous because you'll have like the same church in there like 20 different ways. So you can combine those together and clean up your database a little bit more easily that way. You can also turn security on in the program. That's going to be under that administration and users and passwords, so that when you open the program up, it's going to ask you for a username and a password, and you can set privileges based off of that depending on what you want to do. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to ask me later, and the directions are also going to be in the handout that we send. So tomorrow I'm going to email out all of you guys. It'll have a copy, 1 of the handout here, but 2 of the take-home notes, which has all the notes for everything that we went through today. So that way if you didn't catch something, no problem. And we'll also have that video posted up there as well, although that usually takes a couple days to get posted. Yes?
On the keyword cleanup, how do you set the default?
So there's only one that has a default value, and that's just the city and state name. The rest of them don't have a default value because most of the fields you don't have to fill in. So for example, you don't have to fill somebody's religion in, so you don't want it to default to Catholic because not everybody is Catholic and you might not know somebody's religion. So if you tab past that field, it's not going to default it to a religion. So the only one with a default is the city and state name. And if you pull up that city and state name list, then you can drop down the default and choose it there, but that's the only one that has a default. Any other questions? Yeah?
How do we know what crosses over from each program?
Okay.
Like backup, is that just backing up church, or does that back up for, and then?
The backup backs up all the programs.
Okay.
So backup is going to cover everything. A fix would fix everything if you run the system process that way. When adding and deleting are not shared between the programs, but the data themselves, with the exception of remarks are not shared. Keywords by default are not shared, but you can choose to share them. And registration dates are not shared, but you can choose to share them. So remarks, keywords, and registration dates. Everything else, if that field is in the other program, it's shared between the 2 of them. So addresses, names, email addresses, phone numbers, dates of birth, talent ministry information, all of that is going to be flowing back and forth. So if you change it in one, it's automatically changed in the other.
So if you have, let's say, you have a school child who's not Catholic, so they're not registered in the church. If you change the grade, even like in the church program, even though they're not in the church program because they're not a member, because it has the grade field, it will change.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to send out that information on Friday. Once we get the videos posted up, we'll send that information out as well. My cards are over on the table, so if you have questions, I know we went through everything quickly. We have 2 hours to do it. Give me a call, send me an email, send me a telegram, whatever you want to do. We are here to help. We can log in remotely to your machines and walk you through whatever you need. We are very happy to do that. So give me a call. If you are registered for lunch, lunch is downstairs, and we can go down there now. And then if not, if you're coming back for the second class, that's going to be at 12:15, I think. So thank you very much.